Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So guys, let me check my sound before I do anything. I always like to make sure this is intact because, like I said, I've done entire shows where my sound was off and I was essentially just a mime. Alright, good, sound is intact. I see myself moving and shaking. Good morning, everyone. It is 6:35 a.m. here in Richmond, Virginia. Cold Richmond, Virginia day. This is not necessarily my normal time, but you guys know I tend to pop in pretty much anytime. I will still be on tonight between 5 and 6, and I have Hard Bastard on at 7 p.m. So that should be a damn good show. Also, I don't necessarily do this every video, even though I try to. I want to thank everyone who helps the show. And when I say helps, I really mean helps the show. Whether you're a contributor, whether you share, not contributor, whether you share, whether you write, whether you send me emails with content ideas, or whether you send me emails and say, hey, have you seen this particular article on this particular subject about this particular person? Or whether you help with the Patreon or Super Cash or PayPal. However, thank you very much. Hell, even if you like the videos, if you share the videos, if you dislike the videos, either way. Thank you very much. I appreciate you looking at it, and I appreciate you giving me, I guess, the benefit of the doubt when I give my point of view. All governments lie. So, do you remember going back to the sarin gas attack in Syria? Sarin gas goes off. Trump comes out, and he said, I saw the dead babies. It was the dead babies. This plutocrat, supposedly billionaire, that on his first day in office, or first 2 days, whatever, had a strike where he killed a lot of dead babies. But on this very particular day, one of the dead babies from one of the shithole countries that he doesn't want to come into the United States stirred him so much, dug into him so much, he had to respond. Within a day or so, Donald Trump fired off missile strikes. This was amazing that he would do this. He didn't wait for an investigation. He just fired off missile strikes. Now, this was bizarre on a few counts. Syria, in no way, had anything to gain from a gas attack. Meaning, they were working with Russia. Russia had propped up their government. They were kicking ass from the standpoint of exterminating or getting rid of terrorists. They had everything they wanted. The United States was invading their borders, but beyond that, the government itself was winning that particular war. They had no reason to throw that gas attack. Now, I want you, in fact, before we go further, I want you to see the reaction to the media in this and what they were saying about this during the time this took place.
Into greater detail, we see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield.
I would not be surprised if somebody told me he was touching himself under the table as he said that I am guided by the beauty of my weapons. Yes, they were taking those pictures in this kind of propagandization way. But that is propaganda. That's the point of propaganda. They wanted it to look that way. Fact is, those things are having a brief flight before it hits something, blows up, and murders whoever's around. Who's ever in the blast radius of those weapons. You're fighting over these things. These things are killers. Let's keep going. There's more. I want you to see more reaction to this because all of this was in lockstep. And this is what was going out to the American public as this was taking place.
Donald Trump became president of the United States.
There's a new sheriff in town, and you know what? The new sheriff wants to look like RoboCop compared to the last one.
I think that the moment when someone becomes president of the United States is the moment when they first really use American military might.
That is a decisive use of American power.
We not only took out a Syrian Air Force base, we took out a terrorist
airstrip.
That sends quite a message. That's what's going to happen if you continue to use these chemical weapons.
Now have a president who said something and he backed up his words with action.
This is a strong statement. This is a president who will, yes, he'll consider, yes, he'll meet and look at all the options, but he'll act, and which is not always something you could say about Barack Obama.
President Trump recognized that the President of the United States does have to act to enforce international norms.
This is a president who's coming off of a rocky couple of weeks. Arguably, he's turned the page on that to some extent with these foreign leader meetings that he's had this week, and now with the focus on Syria.
By the way, notice something. Some of these people are supposed to be lefties. Like, Fareed Zakaria is supposed to be a lefty. I mean, they're going from Fox News to MSNBC and back and forth and back and forth. And for all intents and purposes, these guys are saying the same thing. All of these people are neocons. Let's keep going. There's more. I mean, they're fawning over this. They're, you know, getting aroused by this.
I think it is amazing optics that he's down at Mar-a-Lago and he was having dinner with Xi Jinping and all of this was taking place, and then he bids him good night, and then this is what this is everything that's happening the rest of the evening and this morning. So it shows that he can multitask.
How cool is that to actually make the Chinese Politburo sit through a night of American targeted bombing?
In terms of the credibility of American power, I think most traditional Washington commentators would say he's put more oomph, more believability back into it.
This is a show of force that the world needs to see, and the world now knows that we will do. And everybody in the military that I have spoken to is extremely proud to call him our president this morning.
It was clear to me that he wanted to do something, and he did something. You know, I have to say, for me personally, I support the response.
He demonstrated that he was going to act, and he did act as commander-in-chief last night.
He took swift, decisive action, and it made Americans proud. I think it made people all around the world proud. And as 400,000 Syrians have been killed, 5 million Syrians have been displaced, we finally have a man who knows the difference between right and wrong and good and evil, and it makes us proud, finally.
You know, David was talking about this tough-minded U.S. policy, a show of strength, which is very Trump, and also a show of moral authority, for sure.
A show of moral authority. I'm sorry, I couldn't get my finger on the button. She damn near fell off the chair. A show of moral authority. Donald Trump and the United States is a show of moral authority with her hitting the button. These people are either liars or incompetent. They're either liars or incompetent. I don't know which. I'm sorry, I don't know which. My powers of deduction cannot peer into the facade to which they are creating. I don't know which. I mean, come on. Like, it is understood that the United States was sending money and weapons to terrorists in order to undermine that government. That was understood. That was in the news. That wasn't a secret. That was something that was out. People knew about it. Tulsi Gabbard comes out saying, "Stop arming terrorists," the name of the bill. Moral authority? And that other maniac judge on Fox News screaming, talking about 400,000 people killed. We were partially responsible for those 400,000 people being killed. I'm sorry. I don't like the hypocrisy. I don't like the hypocrisy. This is what is going out to the airwaves to other Americans when they're waking up in the morning and they're seeing that took place, meaning the missile strikes. Then they're hearing about it. They're seeing all of these cheerleaders talking about how awesome it is that Donald Trump gave somebody in some country that they don't even know where it is, probably could never find it on the map, a black eye. There's more. It's not even finished. It's only halfway through. Let's keep going.
And close your eyes, and it wasn't Donald Trump would be fitting for any president you can think of in the last 40 years. It's very presidential. It sets a moral compass for the United States, which a lot of people thought was lacking.
Donald Trump appeared over this past week to be mugged by reality, as the old saying goes.
I think he found the consequences of embracing Assad, which is in effect what he did, just too horrifying. I thought the president was sincere.
The U.S. military has an authority to protect civilians. They have, in this case, they also have an authority to protect the U.S. military who are there in the country and in the region and allies in the area.
You know how the U.S. military can protect civilians? Stop killing them. How about stop killing them? How about just pull your forces out of those areas? Leave those places to their devices. They rise or fall of their own. Leave them to their devices. If they care so much about not killing civilians, then they should stop killing civilians. How about stop bombing Syria? How about stop bombing Iraq? How about stop bombing Somalia? How about stop bombing all those countries and leave them to their devices? What I can tell you is, if you would have left Iraq to its devices, 1 million people will still be on this planet. In fact, more than 1 million people. A lot of people will still have a home. They may have an asshole as a leader, but they themselves can make the determination on whether or not they're going to overthrow Saddam Hussein. Not us. None of this is any of our business. None of this is any of our business. Let's let it keep going. I don't like the lying. That's all. I don't like these guys making shit up in the way they're making shit up.
We've been asking, what is the significance to the world community seeing that the United States is standing as a moral leader? You can answer that one. Or what would the response have been if the United States again allowed Assad to use chemical weapons and we did nothing?
So it was imperfect, but it did more than the diplomatic initiative.
This could be good for infrastructure spending, could be good for tax reform, could be good for health reform in the future. So it can maybe kind of unite the country a little bit more.
We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons." And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief.
I have other questions. And for whatever reason, they didn't ask my other questions. In fact, the other questions never came up at all. What constitutional authority does the President of the United States have to fire off a missile strike in a country that in no way is threatening to attack us? What authority does he have to do that? Nothing is attacking us. We have no barbarians at our gates. Even if Syria did it, what constitutional authority is Donald Trump using to fire off this missile strike? Disliking a person or disliking another world leader is not enough to fire off a missile strike if we're talking about the rule of law. That's the very first question I would ask. The second question is, what authority does the President of the United States have to play sheriff in this way? Meaning, again, even if they did it, what authority does the President of the United States have to just fire off willy-nilly a missile in this way? I mean, I thought is the President of the United States a king? Or is the President of the United States held within the rule of law? It seems that the President here has broke international and our own laws firing off this missile strike. What fig leaf is he using for this? Now, mind you, this gets into other questions about the bombings in general. What fig leaf is the President using to have wage this war all across the Middle East in the first place? But beyond that point, just this very specific issue. Also, third question or fourth question, wherever we are. Has ISIS or other terrorist groups released missiles or released chemical weapons in that area? And the answer is yes. If ISIS have also released chemical weapons in that area, and Assad, like I said before, had no reason to do this. Assad was winning that war. One of the things I remember distinctly, they could not figure out a reason, even these guys, these who were rah-rahing this stuff, could not figure out a reason why Assad would do this. What would be his reasoning? He's winning. He has everything in his hand. He has everything that he wants. He has Russia backing him. He's kicking ass from terrorists. He has everything he wants, with the exception of the United States being in its borders. But from a terrorist standpoint and from his government being propped up, he had everything he wants. There was no reason that Assad would release this chemical, because more likely than not, Assad didn't release this chemical. When you look back, you find that there were 52 instances of ISIS releasing chemical weapons. Now, ISIS used chemical weapons at least 52 times in Syria and Iraq, report says. The Islamic State has used chemical weapons, including chlorine and sulfur mustic agents, at least 52 times on the battlefields in Syria and Iraq since it swept to power in 2014, according to a new independent analysis. Now, fact is, the United States knew they used chemical weapons. This was in 2016. This was before Trump took office. Meaning that information was there, that information was available. When that sarin gas attack took place, nobody waited for an investigation. Donald Trump came out, said this was a red line. We don't like them doing this. But again, at no point did they wait for an investigation. Because again, like the UK attack, the investigation is not the point. The point is a pretext. We wanted a reason to hit. This gave us a reason to hit, so we hit. Nobody waited to see whether or not Syria was actually the person who actually fired it. An investigation would have been a thing if you wanted to figure out what actually took place. They didn't care about what took place. They just were looking for a pretext to attack. This took place a little bit later on. This was in 2018. Now Mattis admits there was no evidence Assad used poison gas on his people. Lost in a hyper-politicization huffapaloo surrounding the Nunes Memorandum and the Steele dossier was a striking statement by Secretary of Defense James Mattis that the United States has no evidence that the Syrian government used banned nerve agent against its own people. Well, wait a minute. I just saw all those reporters say that Assad was the culprit, and they were wetting themselves as they were cheering the United States attacking, apparently, what wasn't the person responsible for the chemical weapons attack. So all of that cheering, all of that rah-rahing, all of that wetting themselves over American force, and it matters. Just spill the beans that, yeah, we don't even know if he did it. Yes, we missile struck him, but we don't necessarily know if he did it. Because again, who did it wasn't the point. The point was a pretext in order to get the missile strike. Just saying, it's true. I mean, all of my articles at the bottom, you can look at them yourself. Donald Trump struck, possibly, most likely, an innocent country. Let's go forward into this. Seymour Hersh makes the point that in the first chemical strike that they were blaming Assad for, that wasn't Assad at all. That was the terrorists. That was the terrorists themselves using chemical weapons in order to make those strikes. He makes the point that Obama knew this and hid certain evidence because Obama wanted to do an airstrike. And if you remember, Obama did want to do an airstrike and he was voted down. So was David Cameron in the UK voted down. Barack Obama did not tell the whole story this autumn when he tried to make the case that Bashar al-Assad was responsible for the chemical weapons attack near Damascus on the 21st of August. In some instances, he omitted important intelligence, and others he presented assumptions as fact. Most significant, he failed to acknowledge something known to the United States intelligence community, that the Syrian army is not the only party in the country's civil war with access to sarin, the nerve agent that a UN study concluded, without assessing responsibility, had been used in a rocket attack. In the months before the attack, the American intelligence produced a series of highly classified reports claiming informal Operation Order planning document that precedes ground invasion, citing evidence that Al-Nusra Front, a jihadi group affiliated with Al-Qaeda, had mastered the mechanics of creating sarin and was capable of manufacturing it in quantity. When the attack occurred, Al-Nusra should have been suspect, but the administration cherry-picked intelligence to justify a strike against Assad. Again, this is the point I continuously make. The point was not to have an investigation to figure out who was responsible. They didn't want to know who's responsible. They didn't care to know who's responsible. And if we're being honest, it's possible that the terrorist group that the United States was working with might have been responsible. You have to take that into account. The United States is paying terrorists in that region of the globe. What are they paying those terrorists to do? If they wanted to have an attack on Syria, it would make perfect sense in the world for them to do such a thing. Meaning the terrorists themselves will want to do it because they want the United States getting further into the conflict. The United States want to do it because they want to get rid of Assad. You have two sides that have a meeting of the minds, and there you go. You have your attack. Now, whether the United States did it or not is kind of besides the point. I'm making the point that Trump didn't wait for an investigation. Trump didn't care about who was responsible. Trump just wanted to be able to hit Syria. Seeing so, as though these guys have used chemical weapons this often, it looks like they would have been one of the main culprits in this. Again, if you actually wanted to have an investigation. The investigation wasn't the point. That's what I'm getting at. In many of these cases, when investigation is not the point, the government is up to something suspicious. And just one last point on this. The reason why I'm hitting this and nailing this is because of this article. United States training Syrian militants for false flag attack as basis for airstrikes. Russia mission of defense. Seeing as the first time around that the United States did an airstrike and hit Syria, when again, the Syria government would have had no reason to do what they were being accused of doing, and the investigation never took place. Meaning they never did an investigation to figure out who it was. If we're saying that they're trying to do a chemical false flag, or if the Russians are saying they're doing a chemical false flag attack, and that's what their intelligence says. Seeing as the first time around, that's for all intents and purposes what took place, it's not that mind-blowing of an idea to think that that would be what takes place again, and that used as a pretext for an attack on Damascus. Fact is, whether Syria did it or not is kind of besides the point. We're not the sheriff. We do not have moral high ground to go around telling other countries what they should and shouldn't do. This is fucking obnoxious behavior. The Syrian gas attack is a horrible thing. The sane, irrational person, if the sane, irrational person was heading the government, would have said, I'm sorry that took place. We completely condemn the behavior that would have caused that to take place, meaning whoever did it, the culprit. If you would like, we are willing to send investigators to help you get to the bottom of it. Beyond that, we are leaving you to your own devices. That's the sane, irrational response. Fact is, we have forces in that country. And it's hard to know what those forces are actually doing and what those forces are actually up to. And beyond that, we do know that they want Assad to leave. We do know that they've been paying terrorists to undermine the government. Is it that much of a leap to take the extra step and say, in the same way that we want him to leave, we would like to have a pretext for us to be able to strike him, in which case chemical weapons would be an awesome pretext for us to strike him? No, that is not a leap of logic for me. Seeing that it happened prior, it's not that big of a leap of logic to see that it could potentially happen again. So, I'm going to leave that here. I don't want this one to go too long, even though I know this one probably went longer than I anticipated. 22 minutes, that's not too bad. It's not too bad. I'm thinking the neocons must have a Russian plan set up for Hillary, much like the PNAC plan pre-Bush. The Mueller investigation is about more than just a coup d'etat. Maybe. Maybe. By the way, they never asked the right questions. Like, an anti-war person would be far more skeptical of this. Why is the president able to do this? Why is the president able to fire off missile strikes willy-nilly when nothing is attacking us? What justification is the president using to do this? Why is the president sheriff of the world at this point? How is the president acting unilaterally to attack another country? I would have a ton more questions than what these guys are asking. Should the president act unilaterally in this way? Should the president, any president, take the authority in his own hand for international matters to be essentially sheriff of the world? I mean, come on. They weren't skeptical of this at all. Why is this America's responsibility in addition to the other things? How is America instigating itself into the affairs of other nations when it can't even take care of its homeless problem? I mean, California, it may be a liberal state, but the homeless issue in California is atrocious. It's absolutely atrocious. I guess I'm saying, with all of the issues that are affecting the people of that particular country, half of the country even living in poverty or working a poverty wage. Why are you instigating yourself into the affairs of other nations when you haven't fixed the issues in your own nation? But I'll leave it at this. I don't want this one to go too long, because if anything happens again where there's this kind of sarin gas attack, I don't want it to be like last time where people act like It had to be Assad. It has to be Assad. There's no other thing that it could be. It had to be Assad. When it's understood and known that ISIS had used chemical weapons prior, and that the United States had given weapons to ISIS prior. And the reason why I say that, a study had shown that ISIS was using weapons, or their capacity of weapons, or what they were using, far exceeded what they would have gotten off the battlefield. That was an independent study. That was an independent study. So no, it doesn't blow my mind to say that if the United States wants to take a hit at them, that the United States may work with unsavory groups, terrorist organizations, in order to affect such a thing. It's a win-win. The terrorist group gets what they want, undermining the government, and the United States gets what it wants, to be able to attack Syria. If you don't want Syria to look like Libya, you better leave Syria to its own devices. That's all I'm saying. So, I'll leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks everyone. I'll see you guys in a few.